Love music, live sport. Pole Position with Andy Alston and Adam Todd on RockSport Radio.
Hello and welcome to Pole Position, the motorsport show here on RockSport Radio. Sandy Alston with you alongside Adam Todd, broadcasting live on DAB digital radio across central Scotland, online and on TuneIn. So on the show this week, another Merc double leaves Ferrari in trouble, Rins defies the odds as the rest of the field applauds, and Evans takes a win for Jaguar. That's spectacular. All this and more on this week's Pole Position. Now, Lewis Hamilton made it 3 1-2 finishes for Mercedes in as many races after taking the checkered flag at the Chinese Grand Prix last weekend, finishing ahead of Valtteri Bottas with Ferrari's Sebastian Vettel in third place. And after so much was made of Ferrari being the team to beat going into this season, the silver cars are still leading the way, Adam.
Yeah, it's been a very strange start to the season because everybody in testing, as you mentioned there, fought Ferrari, were quick, and you were actually one of the few people that were saying testing is testing, but I certainly believe from what I saw in testing that Ferrari were going to be very competitive, very strong, and in fact people were even predicting they might be even half a second quicker than Mercedes, but boy, has that not been the case at the start of the season so far. I mean, Mercedes another 1-2, and you mentioned, that's a hat-trick now for them, and that didn't even happen when they were probably at their most dominant in the start of the hybrid era in 2014, so it's really worrying times for Ferrari, because they just didn't have the pace. And credit to Mercedes, you have to say, it's very difficult for smaller teams to challenge Mercedes, how expensive Formula 1 is, but for teams like Ferrari and Red Bull, they've got to do better.
Absolutely. So why have Mercedes been so strong, and can Ferrari start to deliver? Well, joining us on Pole Position to talk more about this, I'm delighted to welcome back Luke Smith from Crash.net. And Luke, some people are suggesting that this could be another season where Mercedes run away with it, but do you think that could be the case?
I think, we've seen the early signs of that possibly being on the cards. 3 1-2 finishes, obviously the best starts of a season by any team in 27 years. It's a little bit concerning, but I think there is good signs coming from Ferrari. I mean, they built a quick race car. That cannot be doubted at all. Bahrain was a race they should have won. It was a race they really should have got a 1-2 in. But we saw Australia was a complete anomaly and misnomer, I think, for the season. And then China, it was just down to just not quite having the tools to extract performance from the car. I think they are definitely still in the hunt. I think the championship is way too early to say that it's over for sure. But it's been an impressive start from Mercedes. I don't think they're going to run away with it, maybe as we saw in the early part of the hybrid era. But I think it's a big wake-up call to Ferrari that they do need to roll up their socks and really find some performance soon. Otherwise, they're going to risk losing this season very, very badly.
Look, one of the things that impressed me most about the race last weekend was when Mercedes double-stacked their cars at that pit stop. It was a risk, but they made it look easy.
They did, yeah, and I think that really sums up everything that has made Mercedes so good over the past 5-6 years of this V6 hybrid era. That the team, it doesn't rest. It always looks to make gains wherever it can, and even in a situation such as that where it really didn't need to do it. It was purely an extra super safe call. They're worried about that if they pitted Bottas on that lap, that was to cover off Vettel from the undercut, but then he might have got the undercut on Hamilton. If they'd pitted Hamilton to protect the leader, then Bottas might have lost out to Vettel. It was a bit of a big gap to Vettel, so I don't really know if that would have been the case. But it's just an amazing way of, instead of them doing it as Ferrari did, where they were sort of thinking, well, which of our drivers do we prioritise, who do we sacrifice? Mercedes said, we're not going to do that. We're going to give both of them the same treatment. And it was just wonderfully executed. And it's the kind of thing that the pit crew, they don't get to practice. You have one car for your practice pit stops. So them to have rolled 2 cars out in the space of about 5 seconds was really astonishing.
Look, were you surprised that Valtteri Bottas wasn't quite able to put Hamilton under pressure and try and force an overtake?
Yeah, it's a little bit surprising. I think that we saw the return of Bottas 2.0 that we saw in Australia in qualifying on Saturday, and that was a really, really impressive displayed by him to get pole position. And then on Sunday in the race, he just didn't get close and didn't really stand much chance. And I think, again, Bottas will be going away from that race sort of thinking, well, like, what can I do? What have I got to do to just find that extra edge that Lewis Hamilton had all the way through the race? I think he's also got to become aware of the fact that the more that Ferrari do slip up like this, then the more likely it is that he will be the only person who can realistically stop Lewis Hamilton from winning the title this year. And it's races such as China that he needs to try and improve on and make sure he can put pressure on his teammate. Because it was a very quiet performance from him that he never looked like getting close really after losing the lead at the first corner.
Hi, look, Adam here. Ferrari were off the pace, no doubt about it. What would you put that down to? Because, as we've mentioned, they were quick in Bahrain, but in China they just didn't have the pace to match Mercedes.
No, they didn't, and I think it's really for them to try and work out in the next few weeks and see where exactly they went wrong. We know they put a lot of focus on their straight line speeds and kind of angled the car to go as much on that as possible. And I think they maybe expected the gap on the straight to Mercedes to be much bigger than it actually was. I think it was a surprise for them, but it wasn't. So that really, I think, was what cost them pretty badly. They weren't even able to get within the DRS range for once that became active on the third lap of the race. And that was really where their chance, I think, to win the race had gone. I think if they thought if we can just keep in range for that long and just get ahead, get in the fight, then we might have a chance here. But yeah, it was just a very, very disappointing weekend for them. And I think they know that they've got to get to the bottom of why this car is being so different in so many places. And one journalist put it to Mattia Binotto, saying we've seen 4 different Ferrari cars this year, one in testing and then a different one at every single race so far. And you don't really know what the true Ferrari car is. And they keep saying that it's a quick car and that the car isn't changeable and that it's the same car all the way through, separated by a few tenths. But the more we do sort of see these wild swings of performance from Bahrain to China, I think the more difficult it is to really believe that.
And would you say Ferrari are their own worst enemy at the minute, or is that a bit harsh?
It's maybe a little bit harsh. I think they're not helping themselves certainly. I think that the team orders debate, I think that was a difficult thing that they did have to manage, and they just didn't manage it well. For me, the bigger issue was the strategy that they then put Leclerc on. I thought it made no sense whatsoever. It really just did give up 4th place without even any chance of a fight. I think that was very, very confusing. I think it does show that for all of the changes and all the revolution that took place at Maranello over the winter, there's still a long way to go. There's still a lot of work that they need to do. You wouldn't see Mercedes making the kind of errors that Ferrari did on race day. You wouldn't see them making such a wild strategy call and leaving a driver completely hung out to dry. I think they've got to take a few lessons from what Mercedes are doing. But again, you go back 2 weeks before China and had Leclerc's car held up, had Vettel kept his cool, and they could have been celebrating a 1-2 finish and the return of Ferrari to the top stage and being a real threat for the title this year. So I think it's all fine margins, but I think Ferrari can definitely do a little bit more to help their cause.
And you mentioned Sebastian Vettel there. The last time he won a race was back at the Belgian Grand Prix last year, so that's 11 races without a win, almost half a season's worth, to put it into context.
Yeah, it's crazy, and I think it's something that he really needs to break soon and get out of that, because there's been so many errors, and I know that he's saying that I don't need to change my approach or anything like that, but I mean, the mistake in Bahrain, that ultimately did cost Ferrari the race more than the broken piece on Leclerc's power unit, because Vettel should have been there to pick up the pieces. He should have been there to ensure that if you lose your first bullet in the gun, the second one is still there. So I think he does need to do a little bit of soul searching and really understand that. He is definitely being given a close challenge by Leclerc. He's being matched every single step of the way so far this season. But Vettel needs to know that ultimately he's got the support from Ferrari that he needs. I mean, he has, I think, as we saw so clearly in China, he is still their lead driver. He is still the man that I think they believe will lead them to the World Championship in the near future. But it's just he's got to win a race. He's just got to get out of this slump and form. And for a team that has been so quick for so long, to go 11 races without a win now, that's really, really concerning, I think, for his long-term form.
Look, I want to get your thoughts on the Pierre Gasly situation at Red Bull, because he started the race on softs when the rest of the front runners were on medium tyres, finished the race in 6th place as well. Why do you think he's struggling so much?
Well, I think it's really just an adjustment period to the RB15 car. He said, and Christian Horner said as well, that it doesn't suit his driving style as it is right now, and that he does need to make a few adjustments on that side. I think if we give Pierre time, I think he can easily get on top of all of this. But it's kind of been a thing through his career that we've seen he's not been very good at immediately getting on the pace and immediately jumping in and being quick. It took him a long time in GP2 to get into race winning or title winning form. I think it was his 3rd season that he eventually won the title. Same in F1 when he came to Toro Rosso. It was all very bumpy to begin with. And even last year, we saw some massive peaks, obviously, in Bahrain when he did finish 4th for Toro Rosso. But he was very inconsistent through the year. He'd have weekends where he would be outstanding and could reach Q3 and could fight for points or Charleston back and be in the top 10. And then others where he would be absolutely nowhere and really just not feature in the race whatsoever. And I think when you're at the front of the grid, that becomes only more obvious when you do have those difficult weekends, which is what he's had so far. And China was disappointing. There was this massive gulf to Verstappen all the way through the weekend. And I think Pierre, he does need to just work on it. And the more time he gets in the RB15, I think the more he'll get on top of all those issues and hopefully make some adjustments, because he's such a quick racing driver. I think the suggestions of Wembley be replaced or anything like that, I think that is anyone taking that seriously is way too early to even think about that being a possibility, because he's a fine racing driver. I think he just needs a bit of time to adjust and calm down this year.
Now, look, McLaren have been showing some promising signs early on, but any hopes of a points finish were wiped out when both of their cars tangled with the Toro Rosso of Danny Kvyat on the first lap. But do you think that Kvyat's penalty was harsh?
Yeah, I do. I do think it was a case of previous incidents perhaps coming into the steward's mind when it came to something like that. And ultimately their penalty system, it doesn't ever, they say it doesn't ever work on the sense of that they have a repeat offender and think, this guy again, let's hit him with a penalty. They're meant to compare it to other similar incidents. And I think that, you look back through other first lap crashes in the past, they don't normally give out such a harsh penalty for that. I mean, a drive-through that's 2 sets below a black flag. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time, and maybe he was a little bit careless. But the contact with Norris means you've got the car coming back onto the track very quickly. It's very hard to avoid that, particularly when you're sort of a bit out of kilter after making contact with Sainz. So, a big shame, because I think for all 3 drivers involved in that incident, there was a decent chance of points this weekend. But ultimately, it was a shame to see them all go out so early. But for Kvyat, I think the penalty really just sort of compounded things and did really wreck his race.
And just finally, look, with 3 races under our belt now, how would you sum up the season so far? Because yes, we've had 3 Mercedes winners, but there's been so many interesting storylines developing so far in 2019.
There have, and I think it really gives good promise for the rest of the season. I think it is, you look at the form book and you might say, Mercedes just going to walk the season and which of their 2 drivers will win, and it's probably going to be Lewis Hamilton. But because Ferrari were so good in Bahrain, I think, and so good in pre-season as well, that does give us good hope for the rest of the season. We know, yes, SF90 is a good racing car. That cannot be doubted. I think once they get on top of all of that, it'll be a fascinating title fight. I think Red Bull deserve a lot of credit as well, because we've seen Max Verstappen pick up the pieces every single time an opportunity's been there for him to. He should be finishing races 5th, and at the moment he's comfortably ahead of he is ahead of the Ferrari guys in the standings. And I think if Red Bull and Honda can make some advancements, they could get in the fight at the front as well. And then, that midfield is so close between Renault, Haas, McLaren, Toro Rosso, Racing Point. You see all of them sort of fighting and getting in the mix. And that's really exciting. And I think there's so much sort of semi-unknowns so far this season. I just really think that the more we get into this year, the more we're going to see that order change. And I think we're far from being confident about how the season was going to end, because so much can change so quickly. So a really exciting start to the season. I think nobody could have foreseen happening after pre-season testing, and hopefully that bodes well that in another 2 months' time we'll have a completely different picture once again.
Look, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for joining us here on the show.
Cheers, guys. Thank you.
That's Luke Smith from Crash.net there. And stay with us as we look at all things MotoGP up next on RockSport Radio.
Love music, live sport. Pole Position with Andy Alston and Adam Todd on RockSport Radio.
Now, it was another dramatic race in MotoGP as Suzuki's Alex Rins secured his first ever win in the Premier class at the Grand Prix of the Americas. Valentino Rossi was second, with Jack Miller taking the final step on the podium. Joining us on the show to look back on the race is Lewis Duncan from Motorsport Week. And Lewis, that was a fantastic result for both Rins and Suzuki.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, such a dramatic race as well. We did not expect it, because we go to Circuit of the Americas every year, pretty much tick it off as a Marc Marquez win and then we move on. But just unbelievable action, and it was a fantastic battle between Rins and Rossi. Rins just had the edge over Rossi, and this result's been a long time coming since the sort of second half of last season. Suzuki made sort of big progress with the GSX-RR, and Rins became a really consistent sort of podium threat. And, Marc Marquez last year pegged Rins and Suzuki to be championship challengers this year. And so far, Rins has been living up to that. He has a strong start to the season, fourth in Qatar, fifth last time out in Argentina, now a win. So he's very much in the hunt now, and Suzuki looked to have such a really solid all-round package.
And the big incident of the race, of course, as you alluded to, Marc Marquez crashing out while leading. You mentioned he'd won every race at the Circuit of the Americas since it came onto the calendar in 2013. How big a blow is that for him, and do you think his confidence will be dented?
Well, he sort of brushed it off as being a mistake that he said after the race that everyone's human, we make mistakes, they can happen, and if you look up to that point, there was no one touching him. He was going to win that race before without that crash. He looked back to Argentina as well, and he was untouchable. So I don't think it's dented his confidence so much. It'll certainly make him think a little bit more. We're going to some circuits later in the season, like the Sachsenring, where he's been unbeaten there as well. So maybe he approaches that weekend differently. But he knows himself that every year that we go on, the championship's getting closer and closer. And, maintaining these incredible streaks at these sort of circuits, like the Circuit of the Americas, like Sachsenring, is getting harder and harder. So it was inevitable at some point, that streak was going to end. The way it ended, though, we didn't expect that crash. Fairly innocuous crash on 12 on lap 9, almost 4 seconds in the lead. But we'll see going forward. Marquez isn't really the rider to sort of let those kind of things dwell on his mind for too long. He'll have moved on already. He'll be thinking, fully focused now on Jerez and trying to, get to the top tip of the podium again. He's only 9 points behind championship leader Dovizioso now, so it's not a massive blow to his championship challenge this early in the season.
And I was just going to say, one rider that did benefit from Marquez's crash was, of course, Andrea Dovizioso. So you mentioned the gap, just 9 points. Nevertheless, Dovi is top of the championship, and I suppose he wouldn't have expected that going into the start of the European season, the way things have panned out.
Well, Qatar was sort of par for the course, really. We knew Ducati's always strong there. We suspected Dovizioso would be a favourite for victory there. Argentina went a lot better than I think Ducati would have expected. Proved that the GP19 is definitely a step forward from last year's bike, working at a circuit that typically hasn't done beforehand. And, apart from the qualifying where he was 13th, the rest of the weekend was quite good for Dovizioso. The pace was always there in the race. He had pretty good pace. He admitted that there was a wet patch on one of the corners, one of the fast corners, that he kept hitting. And he wasn't sure why he was losing the front until he realised it was this wet patch. So that kind of dented his confidence, and by the time he'd realised, he was able to up his pace again and take a different line through that corner. He'd already lost too much ground to actually be a factor in that lead battle. But fourth from 13th, a good recovery job, takes the lead in the championship into the Spanish Grand Prix. It's kind of sort of a reversal of fortunes from last year, where he had a couple of difficult flyaway rounds, and then of course we went to Jerez and he crashed, and Le Mans as well he crashed. So certainly a role reversal from last year. He'll be a lot more confident. He's happy with how he's feeling on the bike, and the fact that he did prove that this chassis is a much better bike, a much more complete package than it was last year. So going to Jerez, where he could well have won last year had it not been for that collision he had with his then teammate Jorge Lorenzo and of course now retired Dani Pedrosa. So I think there'll be a lot of confidence in the Dovizioso camp heading into the European season.
And one rider I want to get your thoughts on is Valentino Rossi. Second place, as we mentioned, just 3 points off Dove in the championship. Based on what you have saw in the opening 3 races of the season, can Yamaha and Rossi mount a title fight?
Well, Jerez will be a real acid test. The last couple of years it's been the circuit that they've really, really struggled on, Yamaha, with the problems they've had with their electronics and their engine and their acceleration issues. Rossi was quite upbeat about it and sort of the progress Yamaha had made over the winter. He did say that the engine's definitely better than last year. It looks like they are making more and more sort of progress with the electronics. Of course, they've got Michele Gada on board this season full time. He joined Yamaha, the factory Yamaha team, sort of from Aragon round, I think, last year. He initially worked on the World Superbike project for Yamaha. So there's been other personnel changes as well behind the scenes at Yamaha, and all of that has certainly helped things. And of course, we head into this sort of 2-week break between America and Spain, where there's going to be some private testing happening. And for the first time, Yamaha are going to be able to sort of join the fellow factories on track now that they have this European test team. So all the ingredients are certainly there for them to make a big step and as we head into the European season. But what stood out for me was, coming into the season, things didn't quite look as promising for Rossi, and with his comments as well about how he thought that the bike hadn't really been making the kind of steps forward that he was expecting. It kind of did have shades of last year about it, but Qatar aside, Argentina he was quick on the Friday and on the Saturday, and in the United States he was quick on through practice and qualifying as well. So the fact that he's been able to string this weekend together now, which is something a lot of stages last year he wasn't able to do. He was always struggling until he got to the race, and then he was able to pull something out of the bag. So the fact that he's got this consistency around him now, and he's able to deliver those strong results, if Jerez goes well, then there isn't any reason why Yamaha can't be a championship challenger. So a lot riding on the Spanish Grand Prix for Yamaha.
And another frustrating race for Cal Crutchlow, unfortunately. How would you sum up his start to the year?
It's been, all things considering, of course, he had, that horrible ankle injury at Phillip Island. I think he shattered the ankle in about, 17 sort of different kind of fractures he had on his ankle. He had about 1 kilogram of metalwork put into the leg. It was a really, really tough winter for Cal. I wasn't sure if he was going to, be able to walk again. There were some doubts whether he could ride. Of course, he had a great start in Qatar, a great race in Argentina. He had pace to have a great race in Argentina before that controversial jump start penalty. Again, he was quick again in the United States, and had he stayed upright, you have to think that Cal Crutchlow probably would have been better placed than Rins and Rossi to win that Grand Prix, given the pace that he was showing during that race all weekend. So, and he admitted himself it was a big lost opportunity, but it was one of those mistakes. They can happen. It's a big Bolognese championship. Quest, he's dropped to 8th now in the standings. He's 35 points adrift of Dovizioso, so he does have a lot of work to do to make up ground, but I think he'll still be relatively, confident and buoyed heading into the European season that, he's fine on the bike. The Honda is definitely a great package, and the LCR team are doing a great job as well. So, again, all the ingredients are there for Cal Crutchlow to go into the European season and make a real good fist of things.
And Lewis, it was a great result for Jack Miller as well. He did well to hold off Dovizioso towards the latter stages of the Grand Prix.
Yeah, it was a great result for Jack Miller, and again, he's been really strong this season so far. Had it not been for that seat problem in Qatar, he would be a bit further up on the points table. But yeah, 4th in Argentina, 3rd in the United States. His first podium, unbelievably, since that dramatic Assen win back in 2016 in wet conditions. It was he went for a different tyre selection to the 2 riders ahead of him. They went for the medium tyres. He went for the soft tyre because he was having some problem with the front, the medium front throughout practice. It was locking. He was having same problems that actually quite a lot of riders were having, but conditions improved quite a lot for Sunday. So he got caught out a little bit by going with the soft tyre, and he was having quite a few moments, but he kept the rear tyre in check, and as you say, he fought on that last lap. He said he went all out to keep Dovizioso behind him, and it was a really well-deserved result, and an important result, of course, because he is one of the names in the frame to potentially be on the works team Ducati next year. You know, Petrucci's only on a 1-year deal, and Petrucci it's been an okay start to the season, but 3 6th places. It's been not this kind of start that perhaps the pre-season predicted it would be for the Italians. So Miller's doing everything right now to put himself firmly in the short window for Petrucci's seat next year. And I think a couple more results like that as we go through the start of the European season, then he's going to be that's going to be a surefire thing, that works Ducati seat.
And Lewis, finally, quick word on Alvaro Bautista and World Superbikes. 11th straight win in Assen at the weekend, another 2 race victories for him. How impressed have you been with his since his switch from MotoGP to Superbikes?
It's been an incredible start to the season for Alvaro and World Superbikes. We weren't really sure how the V4R Panigale was going to go this year. I mean, we knew it was going to be a good bike, but Ducati had an intensive testing program last year, but we weren't sure if it was going to be able to challenge the might of Kawasaki and Jonathan Rea, and whether Alvaro Bautista would be able to adapt as quickly. But of course, the V4R and the Panigale, the Desmo Sedici, the MotoGP bike, do share similar traits, and particularly in the engine. So he's been able to sort of adapt himself quite well because of that. And the bike does have a considerable power advantage. It revs to 16,000 RPM, whereas the Kawasaki's are only sort of just over 14,000. But if you look at where the other Ducati riders have been, I mean, Chaz Davies has had his injury problems, but he's not been on the ball. The same as Bautista. Likewise, the Barney Ducati of Michael Ruben Rinaldi and Eugene Laverty as well. Although Laverty is on a bike that has been a little bit doesn't have quite as much power as the factory bike. Although I think that's starting to change now. So the bike's been great, but Bautista's been really making a difference. And Assen was such a pivotal round because we all expected things to be closer, and we actually thought, perhaps Jonathan Rea, 12 times a winner at Assen beforehand, he could come in here and reignite his championship hopes. Didn't work out that way, and now he's not so certain there's any tracks coming up that he can beat the Ducati at. And looking at the different types of tracks that Bautista and Ducati have been quick at, it's hard to see them being beaten right now. So, Bautista has been mightily impressive, and he definitely deserves this World Championship if he goes on to win it. And at this stage, you're going to be hard pressed to find anyone that isn't backing Bautista for the World Championship.
Lewis, thanks for joining us on the show. Always a pleasure to chat all things bikes with you. Lewis Duncan from Motorsport Week there, speaking to us on RockSport Radio.
Now, moving on to Formula E, and it was another eventful race in Rome last weekend, as Jaguar's Mitch Evans became the 7th different winner in his many races. He finished ahead of Techeetah's Andre Lotterer, with HWA's Stoffel Van Doorn taking his first podium in the series. Now, Evans passed Lotterer for the win at the bus stop chicane in a brave move where there wasn't a lot of room for things to go wrong. And he said that he had to think outside the box to find a way through.
Yeah, I mean, we all know Andre's pretty hard to pass, so I had to become a little bit creative. And to be honest, I wasn't really expecting to pass there, but he covered really, really a lot. So I thought, okay, let's try for an undercut, and made it move. So made it stick. I mean, it was close. We obviously made a lot of contact, but it was just, I think it was reasonably fair. I've not seen the replay, so I'm not sure how it all happened in terms of the aftermath. But after that, I should have put my head down. I missed the attack mode once, which made my life a lot harder, but we had quite good pace, so I just put my head down and tried to wipe it from my mind.
Now let's look back at another busy race now by speaking to Conrad O'Keefe from eRacing.net, who joins us now. And Conrad, what was your take on the Evans move?
My take was that it was quite hard, but definitely fair. The first time I actually saw it, I reckoned that it was a bit too close for comfort, in that the first angle that was shown, it showed Andre definitely moving aside, but it was hard to tell whether he'd brushed against a barrier or not. But on replays, it was definitely hard but fair. Evans saw the move on the inside, he went for it with aplomb. And Andre, to be fair, he was not exactly compliant, but he knew the risk involved, and he knew that he wanted to keep his car on track in second place rather than risk putting it in the barriers. And both drivers gave each other equal respect. It was a joy to see.
And it was a big weekend for Jaguar as well, because they were in the headlines going into this race after parting company with Nelson Piquet Jr. That win couldn't have come at a better time.
Yeah, it's perfect timing for Jaguar Racing because they've been through the mill recently. Nelson obviously left by mutual consent because the results just weren't there. He was a highly paid driver and was expected to be the number one when he came in at the start of last season, but it just hasn't worked out and his form has nosedived, especially this season. Mitch has been incredibly consistent. He's scored in every race so far this season. He's not high up there with the title contenders, but he's definitely been banking home consistent points for Jaguar. But not only to get his first podium, but his first win, and in the fashion that he did, especially when he missed the attack mode usage on the second time, and it looked like that could put his win in jeopardy. For someone who is 24 and not so experienced, that was an incredible win for him to take.
I couldn't help but feel a little bit sorry for Andre Lotterer, though, because it's amazing to think that he still hasn't won a race yet in this series.
Yeah, it's absolutely incredible. I mean, this isn't the end of his second season yet, so there's plenty of time, but it's amazing that he hasn't won so far in that Techeetah, and it's not necessarily down to him putting in poor performances, it's just sometimes the luck hasn't been there. He could quite easily have won in Hong Kong were it not for the incident with Bird on the last lap. But yeah, it's incredible to think that Jean-Eric Burns had the lion's share of results when Lotterer's actually followed him quite close, and second place was still a very respectable result in that race, especially when you think consistency for most drivers has been all over the place this season.
Hi Conrad, Adam here. I dare say when reigning world champion Jean-Eric Vergne has only been in the points 3 times this season, yet he's only 11 points away from being top of the standings. It just goes to show how wide open this title fight is.
Yeah, it's absolutely wide open because one weekend someone can finish on the podium or even take the win, and the next race they're absolutely nowhere. Almost any team apart from like the bottom 3 or 4 are able to hook up the car to a position where they can even get a 1-2 if things go in their way. Although no one has yet, there's definitely been chances like in Marrakesh with the BMWs. But some drivers don't manage to hook it up in certain races, some teams don't, and it's absolutely wild. It'll go down to them.
And Conrad, with so many different race winners so far, do you think this championship battle could purely come down to which driver and team proves to be the most consistent?
Yeah, it's definitely going to be consistency that decides this one, because a lot of drivers have the pace this season, but it's just translating that from track to track. And so far, even teams that were considered not to be in the best shape for titles, like Mahindra, their consistency is what's getting them right in the title fight and nearly putting them top. As of recent, Techeetah, who had a slow start, the pure pace of their car has bailed them out a little bit. Same with Audi. But Mahindra and Virgin's consistency has definitely kept them in there as well. And between those 4, I'd be surprised if it didn't go down to the wire.
And do you think last weekend was a missed opportunity for Pascal Wehrlein to force his way into the title fight?
It's just a missed opportunity for Mahindra, full stop, because although the pace wasn't dreadful by any means, it just wasn't there to challenge, and Mahindra obviously aren't used to that this season. And compared to the might of manufacturers, they're going to need to be on it and more consistent to be able to keep up with the quicker cars. But yeah, it's probably hit Pascal more because along with Mexico City where he lost that win, it's just chances that are slipping out of his hands that don't really seem like his fault.
And Conrad, just finally, we're past the midway point in the season now. We're running out of different winners, I dare say. But who should we be keeping an eye out here ahead of the Paris E-Prix next weekend?
Out of the ones that haven't won, well, Andre, of course. Stoffel van Dorn, I wouldn't be surprised. Sometimes he can be really on it in that HWA. And outside of winning, I reckon Oliver Turvey might end up outperforming his Nia car eventually because he's too good a driver to keep plodding home outside of the points or around 9th, 10th. He'll hook it up sometime.
Great stuff, Conrad. Thanks very much for joining us here on the show.
It's been a pleasure.
That's Conrad O'Keefe there from eracing.net, speaking to us on RockSport Radio. Now, moving on to the rally stage now, and the World Rally Championship manufacturers are making their way to Argentina for the 5th round of the season next week. Hyundai's Thierry Neuville leads the way, of course, at the top of the standings for the first time this year. Now, joining us on pole position to look ahead to this event is rally expert David Halley. And David, when you look at the standings, Neuville's been on the podium 3 times and he hasn't finished lower than 4th in Mexico, whereas those around him, they've had a problem along the way. So do you think we're witnessing a different Neuville out there this season?
You would look at the results and say that, but he has, on occasion this year, still thrown the car into the undergrowth when he shouldn't have by overdriving when he gets a little bit overexcited. So he's possibly matured a little bit, but there has still been glimpses of that slightly impetuous nature taking over from time to time.
Now, after his win in Sardinia last year, it's fair to say he lost his way a little bit, but do you think this could perhaps be where Seb Loeb kind of proved his worth here for Hyundai behind the scenes, a little bit of his influence benefiting Neuville?
He's going to be a calming influence. He's obviously not in the car for the next couple of events because they're gravel and they're a long way away from his house. But yes, he's going to be providing some input into the team and hopefully provide that stabilising old hand round shoulder to guide the young man towards hopefully his maiden championship.
Now, one man back in the car for Hyundai, Andreas Mikkelsen, of course, after being dropped for Corsica. He'll be wanting to send a message to the rest of the field here, surely.
Absolutely. He started out the year full of hopes. It then all went wrong when he was in the car. He just couldn't get a break at all and get a result. And he was taken out the car when Sebastian Loeb came along, and now he's back in the car. So he's going to have to prove himself, basically.
Now, David, if you had said to Sebastian Ogier that after 4 rounds this season, you'd be 2 points away from being top of the championship, I think he'd bite your hand off. But do you think he needs Esa-Pekka Lappi in there in that other Citroen to help him out a little bit here as this battle hots up?
I don't think Sebastian Ogier needs a help at all. I think it would be good for Esa-Pekka Lappi to learn from Sebastian and get that little bit of experience to get to stop the silly mistakes. But Ogier just lives on a different planet to everybody else, and he brings the team round about, and we saw that at M Sport over the last couple of years. He brought the team together and brought performance out of a team that hadn't done that well for a number of years, and he does live on this slightly different plane to the rest of the drivers. He's got a bit of a golden touch too, and when he slides off, he gets back on. When everybody else slides off, they take a corner off the car. It's a strange one.
David, this is an event that Toyota's Ott Tanak dominated last year after a tricky start. I dare say it's the perfect place for him to get back on track after the disappointment of Corsica.
Absolutely. We've got 2 gravel events coming up, back-to-back, Argentina and Chile. In fact, most of the teams aren't even coming back between the events. So he's going to be really on it. He can do the job. He's got the car to do the job. I think we'll see a very strong championship push for him at this moment, and possibly after the next couple of events, he'll be leading the championship, I think.
Do you think this could be the event where we see Chris Meek have a good go of it without running into any problems, David? Because it just seems to be that we see little glimpses of that talent shining through, but for one reason or another there's a puncture or there's something wrong with that Toyota.
He's the one. You think about Sebastian Ogier, who slides off and gets back on. Chris is the guy that slides off and takes a corner off the car in the same place at the same pace. He just can't catch a break. He's brilliant. He's quick. He knows the car now. It's getting better in the car. He should do really, really well, but you just never know with Chris. It can just be a tiny little moment and it's all over, and he's sitting on a rock beside the car with the car in bits. It just happens so often.
And David, Corsica was such a bittersweet event for M Sport, and Elfyn Evans in particular, of course, but I dare say everyone behind the scenes has got a lift from the fact that the car was quick, the car was competitive, and in there for the win. How do you think Elfyn approaches this event?
He approaches it with the knowledge that the car is there, that he's got the speed, so it's been a great boost to his confidence. He feels a lot happier in the car, So I'm sure he will give absolutely a superb performance. And Timo Sunonen is now coming into events that he's done before in a world car, so he's going to be on the ball as well for M Sport. So I think they could spring a surprise. I'm not so sure there's a win in it for them, but there's certainly podiums to be had in that car. That car is still a very, very good car.
Now, Sunonen, you mentioned there, he was under instruction to get that car to the end in Corsica, but do you think M Sport will let him go loose and go for it here in Argentina?
No, I think the leash is still going to be on. He needs to build a basis for a championship. I think this is a different surface. It's more his preferred surface, if you like, the loose surface. So he'll still be very quick, but I think he will be on the instruction to get the cars in, particularly Argentina, because there's no chance to do an awful lot of work to the cars between Argentina and Chile. So the cars really have to finish Argentina if they're going to start Chile.
David, we've got some rally to look forwad to this weekend with the Speyside stages in the Scottish Rally Championship. Just how do you see things panning out there?
That's an interesting one. Ewan Thorburn in his 05 Focus, he's done a few events this year, not just in the Scottish Championship. He's getting very comfortable in that car. Now, that's an older car, but it's a lot more technically advanced than the cars round about him. So the car will that car will look after him. We've got David Bogie in the Skoda. He's very, very quick. 8 times I think he's won this event. So he's obviously in with a shout. And then Jock Armstrong running at number 3. They're all going to be in with a hunt. Last time out, we saw Gary Pearson have a strong showing, button off, that put him back a bit, but still finished the event well. He's in there as well. Donnie McDonald, another R5 Fiesta. The list goes on. It's going to be a very interesting event.
Definitely, and it's one where Gary Pearson took his first ever win in the Scottish Rally Championship at this event back in 2016, I'm sure it was, and then crashing out last year. So he's another one in particular to keep an eye on.
Again, Gary's not had a full-time run in the championship for a while, so we talk a lot about seat time and confidence. He's going for the full championship this year, so he says, and certainly he showed his speed last time out, other than a small whoopsie that set him back. But as I say, he finished strongly in the event, and as long as he keeps it on the brown and greasy stuff, not the green stuff, he should be very quick and up there.
And David, hopefully the weather seems to be looking good this weekend as well. That'll be a boost for the drivers.
It will, but it won't, because there'll be a lot of dust hanging in the trees. Although the ground will be much firmer and less muddy and slidey, you do run into the problem of dust hanging in the trees. So the guy leading from the front, David Bogie, he gets first go into the forest, so the dust will not be there. As more cars go through, the dust gets thicker and thicker and thicker. If there's no wind, like there hasn't been today, then that will just hang in the trees and will affect the later runners.
David, this week the Scottish Government has passed legislation to allow closed-road motorsport to take place once again. What's your reaction to that?
Absolutely superb. It's been a long time coming. We had the fatal accident inquiry that we had to go through. This legislation came into effect in England and Wales last year, but the Scottish Government held back on it while the fatal accident inquiry was completing, and it allows us to consider having Jim Clark Rally back again in the Borders on the tarmac, and that can only be good news for the world of rallying.
Oh, absolutely, and the Jim Clark Rally website urging competitors to pencil the date in for the Borders event, which is the 24th and 25th, I'm sure, of May. David, just finally, could you sum up how beneficial this will be for the Scottish rally scene?
Well, it's a great event. It's got a great deal of history to it. It's on superb Borders roads, and it brings people to the Borders. Now, the Borders is obviously a farming community. It relates to Jim Clark, the great Formula One double world champion, who was very keen when he wasn't competing to be on his sheep farm in the Borders, and bringing people and bringing the event and therefore money coming into the Borders is very important for the Borders itself, and adding an additional tarmac event to potentially the Scottish Championship as we go forward, and potentially back into the British Championship. It's a great pull for the area.
David, always a pleasure. Thanks very much for your time here on the show.
You're very welcome. We'll do it again next week.
That's rally expert David Halley there. Alright, now let's get a special Superfast Scots roundup now with Glenn Alcock.
So it's not my usual Superfast Scots update tonight because I am recording this from the Hotel Castello, which is in San Pietro, and it's just outside of Imola. We're approaching the 25th anniversary of the 1994 San Marino Grand Prix, which tragically saw the deaths of both Roland Ratzenberger and Ayrton Senna. And Senna was my huge kind of childhood hero, so I've always wanted to come to Imola, visit the Senna Memorial and kind of pay tribute to him. So yesterday I got the opportunity to drive around the Imola circuit, but I mentioned the Hotel Castello, so I'm actually staying in Suite 200, which was the room where Ayrton spent his last night on the Saturday after the death of Ratzenberger and before the San Marino Grand Prix on the Sunday. I was a little bit undecided about booking here because obviously it's a little bit got a wee bit of kind of morbid kind of history, but apparently the staff, were very, very knowledgeable, and they'd show you memorabilia and tell you stories about him and stuff, and for a Senna fan, it is a good place to stay, so I decided to do that. But it's a little bit strange, staying in this room knowing its history, but it is a beautiful area. Really, really nice scenery. Last night I took a wee walk down to the Italian, the Trattoria Romagnola, which Senna used to eat at regularly, so it's a nice wee walk down there. But yesterday, as I mentioned, driving the Formula 3 car, so it was with Pure Sport, who are the organisation who gave me the opportunity to drive the Formula 1 car around Monza in 2015. So drove the F3 car yesterday and also got a wee surprise by driving a Ferrari 458. Due to some of the individuals who were maybe at their first time on track spinning out early on, we ended up having a few kind of red flagged sessions, and as a result of that, it meant that at the end there was only a couple of laps left that I had to make up, and there was no point doing an out lap and then an in lap, so they suggested that I get a little bit of GT experience, and I've never driven a Ferrari on track before, so it was good to go around Imola in the 458. I think I maybe scared the instructor a little bit after trying to drive it like the single seater, but apparently he was quite happy. He said it was very good, but as I went barrelling down towards the Tamburello chicane, I was probably going a little bit too fast. The circuit itself is now really, really impressive. It's had a lot of modifications, obviously, since 1994. They've changed coming from Ravazza onto the main start-finish straight is now flat out, basically all the way to the Tamburello chicane, so it is actually very, very fast again, even without Tamburello. A really beautiful circuit, really nice to drive, quite challenging, very technical. There's a lot of elevation in it, so very, very different from Monza. Obviously a lot of straights and chicanes there, but really enjoyable to drive. You can't kind of escape the history, I don't think, when you're driving around, though, especially if you remember that weekend, as I do. So you pass Tamburello, you see all the flags attached to the debris fence, and you pass it every single lap, and it's hard not to think about what happened at the circuit, but it is really sad actually that it'll always be synonymous with that, because it is such a fantastic track to drive. Took a wee walk down to the Senna statue as well. It's set in Acqua Minerale Park, just on the outside of Tamburello basically, and it looks over towards the corner. The statue, if you've ever seen it, is it's quite an emotional thing to look at. It really captures, I think, the depth of Senna as a man. He seems to be sitting there in contemplation, and it is in a really quite peaceful setting. A Brazilian family had travelled all the way over to see the statue, and the father was quite emotional when he was looking at it, and it just goes to show that Senna's never going to be forgotten, and there's still such a huge passion for him and everything that he achieved to this day. Senna travelled to Scotland in 1991, I think it was, to visit Duns. He was with Professor Sid Watkins, who lived nearby in Coldstream, and he went to Lights of Loreto, which was Jim Clark's school, and went to the Jim Clark room to pay tribute to Jim. And Jim was the first winner of a Grand Prix at the Imola circuit, which was in 1963, so there is a little tribute to him just at the circuit kind of entrance, so it was good to go and see that as well. And I kind of felt personally that after Senna coming all the way to Scotland and doing that, then I was kind of coming back to try and sort of pay tribute to him, as he was a huge hero of mine, and he's had quite a big impact on my life with my love of motorsport, and now I'm trying to do a little bit of driving and things like that, so I think it was really kind of fitting, and it's been a great experience. I'd recommend it to any kind of Senna fans to come over and visit the area.
That's super fast Scots round up there with Glenn Alcock and Adam. Sounds like a fantastic experience for anyone, a Senna fan or not, just a fantastic experience to go along and drive round the circuit and just pay respects to Senna's legacy in motorsport.
100%. I mean, Senna, undoubtedly one of the best drivers of all time. Some will say he's the best, and that's a view shared by many, many people. 3 World Championships in 88, 90, 91, could have been many more. Tragic end to his life, as we know. So yeah, very good to see Glenn paying his respects while out in Imola, and also that Imola remembers Senna as well. So it sounds as if Glenn's having a good experience as a Senna fan. I'm sure we'll hear lots more from Glenn next week.
Absolutely. All right, now it's time for a little bit of this.
Final lap on pole position on RockSport Radio.
Yep, that time of the show, Adam, as you tell us 6 stories from the world of motorsport this week in just 60 seconds. So let's see how you get on this time round, as your time starts now.
Formula 1 eSports champion Brendan Lee will make his real-world racing debut when he drives for Kevin Mills Racing in the Formula Ford 1600 at Snetterton this weekend. Lee will also get behind the wheel of the team at Oulton Park next month. Aussie Supercars are planning a UFC-inspired reality show that they hope will bring a young driver into one of the lower supercars categories. They're also planning a documentary series that will follow one of the teams this year. W Series driver Jamie Chadwick has sealed a factory junior seat with Aston Martin Racing. She will take part in the VLN Endurance Championship with the team and race in the 6-round W Series calendar this year. Thierry Neuville has been revealed as one of the drivers for this year's Hyundai VIP car in this season's TCR Germany series. The i30 will also be driven by journalists, influencers and other well-known motorsport drivers throughout the season. Volkswagen are fitting DRS to their IDR electric supercar that they hope will beat the electric lap record at the Nürburgring this summer. Volkswagen say it will reduce downforce by as much as 20%, will reduce the strain on the car's battery. I know I'm not going to make it this week, unfortunately. And finally, Formula E boss Alejandro Agag says he's invited Ferrari to join the series, but they haven't even replied to him. Lots of big manufacturers have joined the series over the last few years, but it looks like Agag will be waiting a while, and a long while at that, until he hears back from Maranello.
What a shame, eh?
Very, very. I mean, Formula E certainly, they're attracting all the manufacturers, aren't they? And a lot of governments in Europe have already made the commitment to introduce electric car vehicles by 2030, 2040, whatever year it is for different countries. So sooner or later, Ferrari are going to have to look elsewhere, because at the end of the day, a lot of these big manufacturers are in motorsport to help sell their road cars. Obviously, Ferrari's slightly different in the sense they've got the history behind Formula 1 and very much a racing team, if you like.
But Adam, when I was watching the race back last weekend, you see so many adverts for Porsche and Mercedes-Benz pushing their electric technology as well. If Ferrari had a presence in there, and they could say, well, do you know what, we're still beating the big manufacturers rather than, beating the likes of Red Bull and, who are a good Formula 1 team. I'm not discrediting that, but they're in Formula 1 to sell fizzy drinks. They're not in for the automotive industry. If they were to move to Formula E, it could potentially be beneficial for them.
Yeah, just quickly, I think Red Bull have done a lot for motorsport, in the sense that they developed a very strong young driver programme, very cutthroat at the same time, but I think they have done a lot, and if you took away the 2 Red Bull teams, it would be a big loss for Formula 1, but absolutely Ferrari and Formula E I think would create real issues for Formula 1, because that's kind of, Formula 1's crown jewel, if you like, to have Ferrari there. Of course, Ferrari race in other championships, World Endurance Championship and so on, but yeah, if you have Ferrari and Formula E, my goodness, that would be very, very competitive indeed, and seeing a nice bright red car, I suppose, in Formula E. Obviously the Mahindras are there, but yeah, Formula E is certainly on the way up, and it'll be interesting to watch its development over the coming years, because as you mentioned there, we've got Mercedes, Porsche, they're all waiting in the wings. When will Ferrari join? Personally, I think it's a matter of time, and we're also hearing that eventually the 2 championships are going to have some sort of merger.
Could you imagine that? That would be very, very interesting to see how that one pans out. And unfortunately, that's all we've got time for on Pole Position this week. But we'll be back from 8 o'clock next Thursday night to do it all again. My thanks to Adam, to our guests, and to you for joining us as well. Stay tuned for the Rock Zone coming up right here on RockSport Radio.
Love music. Live sport. Pole Position with Andy Alston and Adam Todd on RockSport Radio.